Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our, I believe, 8th webinar in our Friday series. Today, we're going to focus on social studies in particular, looking at geography, language, the world around us is our title today. So thank you all for sharing your locations. I see New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, West Virginia, Maryland, Illinois, Virginia, New York, British Columbia, North Carolina, Minnesota, Georgia, Florida, and I see a few of you by way of Latin America, and let's see if there's any other additions since then. Yep, DC, Texas, Washington State, New Jersey. Welcome, everyone. So particularly for us ESL or dual language instructors, we do so enjoy travel and language, and today's content will be right along with that theme. And many of you are already muted, so you found our chat or questions box. The way that the GoToWebinar functionality works, our questions box will be our chat box. So the questions box will be used as a traditional chat box, but when you type in your responses, unfortunately, they don't go public or visible to everyone, and we like to foster that kind of community, so our colleagues will be typing in some responses just to make them visible to everyone. So you might see some smiley faces or just a yes or a quick response to your comment in order to make it public. So we do encourage your participation there. And we do have a variety of webinar topics. We have a few coming up, and we'll circle back to this at the end of our webinars today. But I guess in 2 weeks, we're skipping Friday, the long weekend for Memorial Day, and then we'll come back on Friday, May 29th, and think about family and community wellness, looking at supporting health and learning, that ongoing learning for summer 2020, which will look very different from our typical summer activities and learning. And the archived webinars are available for you at that same website. And again, I'll share that website again at the end of this session. But there you can find all of our topics and many of our dual language, multilingual colleagues' topics, as well as some topics related to policy in this COVID-19 era. And so I just wanted to make you aware that both the video file from today as well as the handouts will be there. But we do have a couple of handouts attached to your dashboard or control panel today, and you can download those directly from there as well. Now we're going to have Maribel come along and start our introductions for us.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I hope you're going to enjoy today's webinar. And since we're talking about social studies and we're talking about geography, but we're also talking about virtual. So let's say that you've been granted a virtual tour of your favorite place in the entire world. If you could travel virtually anywhere right now, this second, where would you go? And let's have some fun with this, because since this is social studies, we're going to ask you to indicate whether you are north, south, east, or west. So let's do some quick introductions, and you can see what my colleagues are saying. My name is Maribel Marrero Colon, and right now I would be at Luquillo Beach in Puerto Rico, which is in the southeastern part of Puerto Rico, looking east towards the Caribbean. So totally miss home right now, especially at this time of year. Take a look at where my colleagues would like to go. We've got Canada, we've got Poland, we've got Madagascar. Absolutely awesome. So let's ask you right now, where would you like to go? So we have the next slide with that question for you. Where would you like to be? And don't forget to add your directions. Well, we've got people looking at the glaciers in Alaska. We've got people in Morocco. Somebody else wants to go to Luquillo with me. That's absolutely awesome. We have Paris in South Korea, New Mexico, California, Some people want to go home to South America. Absolutely. We have a colleague here that is coming to us today from Worcester, Massachusetts, but I think she wants to go home to Venezuela right now. So keep adding your answers and thinking about where you would want to go virtually as we start traveling a little bit through the world of social studies. Our agenda today, we're doing our introductions right now. We have a guest with us who is going to be talking about what she's doing in her school and virtually, which I think is a really great project. I think you're going to enjoy it. We're going to talk about the language of social studies, and then we're going to go right into the activities, which I know you guys totally love. And then hopefully we'll have enough time at the end to do a little brainstorming, getting suggestions and resources from you. Okay, our goals and objectives for today, being a good SciOp teacher as I am, I like my content and language objectives. We're going to present and brainstorm resources and activities that promote interactive social studies concepts. Language objectives is we're going to be talking and we're going to be chatting and we're going to see how do we promote social studies and geography skills. And I love this picture. It says, what's your story? Because guess what? Social studies is all about telling stories. Now we're going to take a look at our educator voices. You know, nowadays nobody gets lost. Even Waldo, Google even finds Waldo. And we have with us today Sandra Daniel from the Globe Academy, who's going to be talking a little bit about her work with her students and distance learning. Sandra, are you there?
Yes, thank you so much, Maribel. So I'm Sandra Daniel. I'm from the Globe Academy. We are a dual language immersion school, K through 8, in Atlanta, Georgia. And so our goal is global learning opportunities through balanced education. We want our students to be global citizens and make a positive impact on the world. So like everyone has been experiencing, you know, we had to adapt very quickly. And so when you're having DLI in a distance learning model, that can kind of be a bit of a challenge, you know. And so I wanted to share with you guys today some of the things that we've learned and some of the things that have helped us in our program. So one of the things that we were looking at as a leadership team, our executive director, Christy Elliott Irby, was sharing with us some articles and planning for what our fall will look like in the next coming year. And a lot of that is up in the air for everyone, you know. And there were two articles that really stuck out to me. There was one that was constructivist approach to online learning. So we're a constructivist school. And so you'll see the image below. That comes from Garrison's research, and that is also included in Karen Swan, D.R. Garrison, and Jennifer C. Richardson's work. So this is kind of the outline, kind of approach that you want to have. You want to have all of these aspects within your learning, your distance learning. And Caitlin Tucker recently wrote an article about successfully taking online classes or offline classes online. And what you see here on the left side in the black box, that's kind of what she's looking for and advocates for in an online lesson. Now, of course, when we're thinking about dual language immersion, we're thinking about that gradual release of responsibility. So that's the work from Fisher and Frey, I do, we do, you do. All of the scaffolding that needs to be there to help our students be successful. So that's really important in the distance learning model. So on the next page, you'll be able to see what some of that could look like in the classroom. So on the right side, our 4th grade immersion teacher, Senora Marin, she's made a PowerPoint presentation that she's uploaded into the Google Classroom of the students. So when we're doing our Google Meets, our synchronous sessions, she's able to go over step by step what is required for the students that week, and then go through how to solve the equations, how to go, going through the steps of the problem. So here you can kind of see a picture of a whiteboard. She showed the students how to insert their work directly into the PowerPoint. So students could be working on the equations as she was explaining it. So she went through step by step, her mini lesson explaining it, and then students were able to participate. On the bottom, you're going to be able to see our kindergarten teacher, Madame Ibo. She does a really great example of a think aloud. And so I want you guys to hear the whole thing, because this is what it looks like in kindergarten, because it's not the same as Senora Marin, where the students are able to directly chat into the chat box, they're able to talk, they're able to ask the questions. In kindergarten, they're just starting to produce. So she needs to do a lot of the modeling of the think aloud and problem solving for the students. And we might be able to hear it.
Avec 8 fraises, Dahlia lui a donné 4 de plus. Alors, Elisabeth a combien de fraises? 8 plus 4 égale à... C'est 11? Égale à 11? 11? Non, attends, je vais compter encore, ok? Comptez avec moi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh! C'est pas 11. C'est 12. C'est correct? Madame Ibo a raison? Merci. Merci. OK. Maintenant, c'est à vous. Il faut faire 2 questions avec ta famille, OK? Vous allez faire 2 questions et vous...
So this kind of just gives you an example of how to do the think aloud in your classes. So of course, when we're doing these synchronous sessions, we'll have the students in the Google Meet, and these sessions are being recorded. So students can always go back and reference them. They can pause, they can play, and that just helps give them a little bit more think time if necessary, and then also more review. Another thing that's really helpful in that is having asynchronous sessions as well. So a lot of our teachers are doing read alouds with the students, asking questions, and leaving those in the Google Classroom, since they might not necessarily, the students might not necessarily be able to, especially for kindergarten, be able to ask questions or answer questions maybe. And they might need to listen to that modeling and get that language input. So that's a really great way that we've been able to do that. We also have office hours for the students. So that's the time that kids can ask questions, the teachers can check in with them. A lot of teachers in the lower grades are doing practice of the language and conversation or games. But really it's to get more time in the language apart from the asynchronous and synchronous sessions. So discussion. So some of our teachers are first grade immersion teachers, Senora Tarazona. You can see on the bottom, she's kind of written a daily math question. So the students are able to solve the equations and then write their answers. So this is a little bit different from the other time that we looked at Senora Marin's class, where they were explaining their reasoning for solving the equations. Right here, they're practicing reading and computation. So that was a great way that she was able to kind of have a little bit of discussion at that grade level. We can also do the flip grids, as we mentioned, kind of like a turn and talk, so the teacher can upload an activity. Mary Bell was talking about getting out and about. This could be like a field trip at your own home, looking at living and non-living things. So let's see kind of what that might look like.
花和树都是生物。你看，这棵树是生物，然后草是生物，然后花也是生物，花也是生物，刘老师也是生物，非生物，非生物，门是非生物，生物，水杯，花，花，花。
So this was our kindergarten class, and our kindergartner in the sample has actually made a graphic organizer with two sides, two examples of living things and two examples of non-living things. And then as you can see below, there's like a little circle. That's where the students can comment. So underneath, you can just see like a little circle there. Another student has commented there and given feedback. So that's a great way as an alternative to those turn-in talks. As I mentioned, you also have the office hours. So that's a great time for discussion or even leading small groups. Zoom has a great feature for breakout groups. You can also create other meets within Google Meet. So for older students, you can have them working on different projects at one time. So this is kind of where you can dig in a little bit deeper. So a lot of ways that we've been able to have our students work in small groups are using Story Jumper. Our fifth grade immersion teachers are using that to work on their science fiction. Google Slides. You can also see on the right our teacher for fifth grade, Senora Lopez. She has students grouped in groups of 2, and they worked on presentations of magnetism. So students could present one aspect of magnetism to the group, and each child they prepared their own slides, they took turns presenting. It was a great way for them to research deeper and find out more specifics on the topic, become experts, but then also practice their presentational skills with the language. There's also Google Docs. So you'll see on the left, there's some questions about reading. So this is a great way for older students to do book clubs or kind of guided reading with a teacher. They can kind of go back and forth and answer questions about their text. Also, students have been able to, our older students have created Quizlets when they have done a specific project on a specific aspect. Like you can see below, there's examples of electricity and electrical circuit. They can do that as well. They can make their own Kahoots, or they can even use Nearpod, which we'll see a little bit later. So then we need to practice and review. A lot of ways that we can do that in distance learning. Formative is one that our third grade French immersion teacher has been using. It's been wonderful for her and her kids, Madame Bingham. So you'll be able to kind of hear her explain to the students. She did this during a asynchronous activity so that the kids would know how to use the platform.
Donc, quand vous arrivez sur la page, vous allez voir les cercles bleus. Et chaque...
So she goes through step by step, showing the kids how to use the program, which is really helpful. So that gives them a lot of ways to practice, to do homework, and review the concepts that they have done with her during the actual mini lesson. Our teacher, Madame Ho, which you've seen before, she's our fourth grade French immersion teacher. She did a Kahoot with the students. So she did this during a live session. Kids logged in and they were able to participate live in answering the questions to review. So then there's different ways that we can do assessment, even in our distance learning model. So some of the things that you can see that we've had done by our awesome teachers. On the very far right, you can see a habitat that 帅老师 She's our third grade immersion teacher. She had her students make a habitat, label the areas of the habitat, and explain why that was important and what were the aspects that the students saw in there. On the left of that is our immersion second grade teacher, Senor Bucaya. He had the students kind of do a scavenger hunt and find things around, out in their yard to represent place value. So we use Engage New York, and this is the way that the 10s and the 1s are represented. And the students were able to, come back and run and get that, and it was really fun for them. So that was a quick way to kind of assess them and then be able to reflect a little bit. You can also see below the habitat, our third grade immersion teacher, Senora Paulson, she has had the kids make games from colonial times. So they were studying the colonies, and students got to make a game and then present it during the live session. So that was a way that she could kind of make it fun, but then show how the people lived and that it was a different time than how we are living currently today. Right next to that is an example of Google Forms. So this was one of the quizzes that our teacher in 5th grade, Senora Lopez, did with her students so that they could fill it in and she could get a quick assessment on them as well. Our 4th grade Mandarin teacher, Miss Ekman, she has up there examples of, that the students should be speaking in Mandarin, that when they go, they can add something that they learned from science, math, just to share with the class. So this was kind of outside work that they could bring in, and that was a way that she can assess what did they get from this week. And then on the far left, you can see an example of kind of a formative, this one's in Mandarin, Engage New York is in the languages. So this is a way that you can also be able to get a snapshot of what students are understanding. So the next thing that we always have to remember is classroom community. That's really the base of everything. Swan, Garrison, and Richardson, they talked a lot about climate, and creating a culture with the kids. If the kids don't feel safe, they're not going to use the language. And especially during these times, we do need to do things that are kind of fun and bring the group together. So you can see the picture of our immersion teacher in 2nd grade, Madame Tindon. She did a trick on her co-teacher. So you can see here, there's a fish on the back. That was Poisson d'Avril. There's talent shows, tongue twisters that kids can do, jokes, and we can watch really a quick joke from our 5th grade student.
¿Qué hace una persona con un sobre de ketchup en la oreja? Yo no sé. ¿Qué? Escuchando salsa. ¿Qué hace una pez? ¿Qué? Nada. ¿Por qué está triste?
So you can kind of get an idea of just fun things to do with the students. Our kindergarten teacher asked the kids, what's your favorite animal? Kids got to respond below that.
Pero, hola, mi animal favorita es la pero. La pero, son peros, son grandes, son peros, son chiquitos.
So then the teacher could go and give feedback, and then our librarian as well practiced her Spanish and gave feedback to the students.
Sorry, was I supposed to play that one?
Yeah, the tongue twister, yes.
吃葡萄，不吐葡萄皮儿，不吃葡萄，倒吐葡萄皮儿。然后我要说很快，吃葡萄不吐葡萄皮儿，不吃葡萄倒吐葡萄皮儿。
So these are just fun things to get the kids involved. Our first and second grade teachers, Tutu Lao Shi and Gugu Lao Shi, they did cooking recipes, great way to get in culture. Our teacher from first grade, Senora Tarasona, she has questions for the day. Would you like to ride a horse or a falcon? So just keeping things fun. And the last thing that you really need is just strong communication with parents, what resources are available, how they can get feedback from their students, hosting training sessions for them, and checklists, trying to make it as easy as possible.
Thank you so much, Sandra. This was really helpful information, and nice to see how comprehensively. I know a lot of districts are in different places, but many of us are now considering that next year will be more online, at least in some formats and for some periods of time. So it's really helpful to see such a comprehensive approach, and thanks for sharing all these ideas. If anyone has any questions directly for Sandra, is it okay if we connect you over email?
Oh yes, definitely. We're always open to questions and sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Okay, and now we're going to have jump further into social studies. I really liked the connections to content as well as the community aspect. I think that's a great send off into thinking about more about social studies. And so now Maribel's going to take it away with some of the language of social studies.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, social studies is actually the most language-based of all the content areas. If you really stop to think, all of the things that students have to do linguistically throughout all the different social studies areas that we cover. I love this joke because it reminds us about those words that have multiple meanings, idioms, ways of thinking that really have our English learners sometimes scratching their heads, not understanding what's going on. So we have to keep these in mind. So as we look at the language of social studies, there are certain things that we have to stop and think. Now on this map, we're going to do a very quick chat. We're only going to do about a minute or so, but these are all words that have to do with social studies, history, geography. Take a quick look at this word cloud. And what do you think that this word cloud really tells us about the area of social studies? We're only going to take 1 minute, so put some ideas down in your chat box or in the questions box about what is it that you think that this particular word cloud tells us about the topic. We've got people talking about the evolution of society. There's more to social studies than just history. Absolutely. Most of the salient world is involved with it. Absolutely. It's universal, interdisciplinary. That it's gone across continents. That's all correct. So I think we really have to stop and think about what is included. Some of you talk about the words that connect us. Absolutely. All of these are connected to each and every one of us, especially as teachers. So please keep writing your answers. We're going to go on and talk a little bit more about social studies and what it entails. You know, social studies language is very complex and it's involved in many different things. So we're going to click through these pretty quick, but it talks about historical accounts, explanations, arguments, analysis, chronologies, political science, geography, sources of information. All of these are part of the language of social studies. And they all are part of telling the story, not just of individuals or individual countries, but of the whole world. But there's more to it than that. What is it that our English learners have a hard time with? Let's see on the next slide. And I totally love this because I taught social studies for years. And an awesome social studies is hard to find, difficult to part with, and impossible to forget. I bet many of you remember teachers that you had in social studies, history, political science, geography, that still are somewhere in your mind. But our English learners have to face a lot of information, and there are a lot of challenges. The first one is background knowledge. English learners may not have the same background knowledge as their peers. It's very different if you grow up in Virginia, where I'm in Northern Virginia, and someone who maybe comes from Somalia. The background knowledge is different. It's not that they don't have it, it's that it's different. Number two, on our next slide, talks about the difficulty in learning from textbooks. Let's face it, there's a lot in the textbooks. It's condensed, it's facts, it's figures, it's dates, it's very concrete for some and very anecdotal for others. There's a lot of complex vocabulary. And unfortunately, textbooks are written with this whole assumption of prior knowledge. No one has all of that prior knowledge that the textbook publishers think is needed to teach these courses. Number three, it's also difficulty in how to learn. A lot of social studies classes are lectures. So the students have to put up with different accents, different rates of speech, different skills. Vocabulary plays a lot of different roles. And then how about idioms? We talk about tabling a discussion in Congress, or we talk about political cartoons, which are really important in our social studies, but it may be different in different countries. In other countries, Uncle Sam is the bad guy, where in our country, he's the good guy. So we have to really stop and think. And then there's vernacular. So we have to really stop and think. Number four, as we go on, is the different perspectives. English learners bring very valuable experiences from their countries, but often those experiences can be connected to the content in a very different way from the way we're teaching them. Like the example I gave about the political cartoon. So the students come with different concepts or different perspectives that are just as valid as the ones that we're trying to teach. Then there's the difficulty of academic language and vocabulary. English learners must learn the academic language and vocabulary to comprehend the content. But as I mentioned before, social studies is the most language-based of all the content areas. So they have to learn vocabulary and language at the same time. Now, one thing that I found that was really helpful to me was to figure out what is it that every social studies lesson needs. And it's really based on three things: content, task, and language. But then we have to connect content and task and language and tasks, or content and language. So under task, you're looking at the skill sets that the students need. Under social studies content, we're talking about comprehension about the topic, and then the language involved, and then how do we put them together? On the next slide, I have a sample lesson, and it really helped to break this down. The first thing is the topic. The topic that we're working with here, let's say, is the American Revolution, about the colonists striking back. Well, how did they strike back? If we click on to the next piece, we're going to ask them, if we're thinking about, for example, imports and exports, we would have the kids analyzing charts and graphs from the time period of the Revolution and looking at what was going on with the imports of tea and other supplies. Then we're going to ask them through a Squeepters activity, which stands for survey, question, predict, read, respond, and summarize. It's a really cool way of looking at reading. And I'm going to give them that activity on a reading on the Boston Tea Party and what was going on. Then I'm going to ask the students, because grammar and past tense and present tense is the bane of every ESL teacher's existence, is I want them to change the reading from past tense to the present tense, where they're making believe that they're writing a newspaper article during the actual Boston Tea Party. Now, how do we connect these? We connect them, number one, with task and content. I want them to interpret data in a historical context. I want them to look at charts and graphs. For vocabulary, I'm going to do a list, group, label, activity. Then I'm going to ask them to go back to that reading that we did and annotate it for important content and vocabulary. And then finally, how do I put it all together? Using all of this information, I'm going to ask my kids to create a reader's theater role play of the Boston Tea Party. See how it all fits together? And it really comes down to content, language, and task working together. Now, as we move on, one of my colleagues put this up, and I thought this was a really great idea. So I'm going to ask, Maria, is this you coming up with this great list?
Yes, this is me. So for transition words, they're very important whether we're in the classroom or when we're at working at home, because those transition words are the ones that carry the speaker and the writer from one idea to the next. They help the listener or the reader to see that connection or relationship between ideas, and it prevents sudden jarring mental leaps between sentences and paragraphs. And so students at home, they really have compact spaces because they have all of their things at home, and so we thought bookmarks would be a great thing. But even in the classroom, bookmarks that are very compact, students that are younger students, but even the older students like bookmarks because it's in their hands. They can put them away quickly, and so we shared with you some cause and effect, comparison and contrast bookmarks that you can easily edit in the handout for any of the language functions, perhaps for sequencing, perhaps for summarizing, or even concluding their statement when they're working on their essays or their paragraphs. And so we're going to move on to our poll. How much social studies are you adding to your home lessons? Let's see what our possible questions are over here, or responses. So we have a poll that will be coming up in a second. A great deal through hands-on activities and reading, some through hands-on activities and reading, mostly online videos or apps. You've added a little bit of social studies to our discussions, or maybe not so much right now during the remote learning time. And the poll is progressing, and we're about to stop and view. Oh, about 40% of you have voted. Remember, if you close your screen or reduce your screen size, you'll be able to see the poll in action. Okay, I think we're going to close our time over here with the poll, and it looks like it's about a quarter of using a little bit of hands-on, mostly online videos, and working a little bit with social studies, because we are connecting with our world. Even though we're in the social distancing era right now, we still want to make those human community connections. Okay, so we're having a slight little difficulty, technical problem with our PowerPoint. We'll get it up running in just a second. Okay, I think we're going to ask somebody else to share the screen right now. I believe Maribel is going to share her PowerPoint screen with all of us.
Okay, just give me a second to get it going, and I'll have it coming up. I'm having some difficulty myself right now. I think we need to close the poll.
Okay, I'm closing the poll right now. Oh, and the screen just popped up for poll number 2. If we could advance to the next slide.
Okay, that's not me. It's not working on mine.
Oh, I think it's Annie. Annie, I think we see your screen again. Might be a little frozen.
She has to unshare.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
once again for everybody for being patient. We do have some really fun activities to share with all of you. Okay. So, I'm gonna, you know what? I'm just as we're getting that up, I'm gonna explain the family language tree. And I know many of you have explored the idea of creating a family tree, right? Of where they came from, where they immigrated from. But have you considered using a family language tree? A family language tree, you interview your participants to your family members actually, where they learned certain languages when they were younger, when they were in school, where they traveled to, and oh, and I think we're getting it ready over here. We could go to only the family tree because I just started the topic, and then we'll go back to our regular spot over here.
Oh, that's all the way down.
Oh, it's all the way down. Okay. Okay. So if we go to, yes, yeah. So if you interview your family members, it's great then to create a family history report, a scrapbook, audiobook, or website. Maybe even create a map of where the languages were. So for example, on the next slide, you'll see where my family is from Poland. But when we explore the languages that we have learned through our lives, it's very diverse. My name is Maria, and I'm on the bottom. So my native language is Polish, and I learned English when I was in school, Spanish, and then Japanese. My brother, on the other hand, only Polish and English. My sister, Polish, English, and Spanish. My mother and father come from 2 different regions in Poland, and so they speak different dialects. My mom speaks Góralski language, and then my father Poznański. And my grandfather spoke Romanian because in World War II he was there. And on the other side of the tree, you can see that our nephews and nieces and daughters and daughter-in-laws, they all have different branches of different language groups. So even though we're American and Polish and Chinese, we speak many languages. So it's a fun project to do. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna go back. We're gonna go back to see some of the stuff that you had brought to us, Maria, about
Sure.
social studies language activities, and you've got some really cool stuff here.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about Google
Yes.
Lit?
Okay. If you haven't gone to Google Lit Trips, you should definitely do that. And it's using Google Earth. And it's a really 3D literary field trip that you can take virtually with your students to all your favorite literature that you have been reading to your students. And it's great because it's already created for you, so you don't have to create this. However, if you are curious about this and have other favorite books, you can make suggestions for these educational leaders to actually put it together for you, or you and your students can also create this. And so there are many different book titles. If you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the listings. So we have Abuela. Are we there yet? Buddy Not Buddy. And these are flexible grade level titles. So for example, like Bud Not Buddy, we did in 5th grade, but it's also a middle school book. And so all you need to do is launch the Google Earth Lit project. Email to you. Yes, there it is. And so there's a table of contents that you just click on there, and the teacher, this teacher created this and shared it with Google Lit Trip. And it's about Abuela in New York City and this magical discussion with her granddaughter And so it takes you to the different pinpoints on Google Earth. So we have Puerto Rico, for example. And it actually, when we click on it, it zooms into Puerto Rico, or the park, and it has on the right-hand side some discussion starters for you. Some Venn diagrams are put in there, graphic organizers, and so you can zoom in and zoom out depending on, and it has videos already put in there for you, so you don't have to look and explore. It's just flying through the areas. And there are different ways to zoom in and out using the little icons that were on the right. You can go plus and minus. You can walk down below and get very close to the lawn. And so it's a fun, free resource for all of us, which is magnificent. So seeing for this story in particular, you visit the Statue of Liberty, you visit the shipping yards, Kite Runner is for Afghanistan. You can go to Farewell to Manzanar. There's lots of books that have been created for you to take that virtual tour that we were talking about in the beginning in our introduction. So it's a free to sign up. We have everything in the handouts for you.
Okay,
So
can you see PowerPoint?
Yes, so these are the directions. You just go to googleittrips.org. You just register the first time. No donation is necessary. You make a selection, and you make one selection at a time, and they will send you the link, and then you have that link forever. And you can share it with teachers, and you can share it with students as well, and family members. Okay, so let's go to the next one.
Yeah, sorry about the technological issue, but thank you to everyone who stepped right in and kept it going. So Nearpod, some of you know Nearpod, and maybe you've worked with it in the past. I'll just have Maribel click on the Peru. There are many Nearpod lessons that you or your district may have access to, but there are a number of free ones. So I'll just have Maribel, if you could click through the preview. You might have to answer a few questions. Just keep going until I just wanted to show. So there'll be guiding questions, and there's objectives, and what I primarily wanted to show, there might be some polls, so feel free to click on it, Maribel, as you progress through. But similarly to what you just saw, there is, you could probably click through that, Maribel, is that when you get to a screen, it'll give you similar Google Earth approaches to seeing like Machu Picchu, or I've done the ancient Egypt one, and they're, you know, little Google slides or more information. And as a teacher, you can of course make up these whole questions specifically, and then when you get to a certain location, you can move around and manipulate so that you can understand more of the setting. So if we can get there, I wanted to just show everybody the virtual tour. Yeah, so the virtual reality of Machu Picchu. And click right in, Mari. It's not appearing for me. There it goes. So you're able to manipulate that around, and the students can kind of make their way through. Anyway, within that Machu Picchu screen, if you wanted to, you could explore a little bit more and see from different settings. So there's a number of them, and similar to this one, Lake Titicaca, you could also see what that's like from a 360 vantage point. But we can return to the slides. And I wanted to also highlight a few apps. So if we go back to the slides, Mari, there are some oral history slides there. And Maribel mentioned, you know, favorite teachers, and I indeed remember an assignment from my 11th grade American history class, which was to do an oral history interview of a family member, neighbor, friend, and I figured this is a great opportunity to do that right now. So in that
Can you
particular
see it?
class, yep,
Can you see the PowerPoint?
yes, we can see it. And so you can develop some questions, and depending on the grade level, of course, you can provide some sample questions, have students prepare artifacts and pictures to amplify the discussion. So either ask the family member or neighbor to bring those to the discussion if they have anything they want to share. Otherwise, a few simple pictures or magazine or printouts from online. There are some sample topics here. Of course, family immigration stories, scary time, how you got through it, just even changes in technology. When did you get a cell phone? Why did you get a cell phone? What were those changes? So recent technology, but there's of course, what kinds of entertainment did you have in the home when you were a kid? And no matter the age of the person, there'd be something to talk about there. And so on the next slide, you have a brainstorming sheet. This is in your handout. So I did an example. I know it's not the hottest topic, but I read or it's not the most uplifting, but I guess it is in the end. So about polio and the eradication, thinking of my aunt who's turning 80 tomorrow, and I'm going to do this interview with her. So I read an article about polio in the 1940s and the incidents and the fear that was out there, and then when it was inoculated. So brainstormed some possible questions, and I do intend to do this recording. So in the end, my 11th grade project, I was able to share that with the family based on a World War II interview with a family friend. And after she passed away, it was a wonderful memory for them to pass along. But certainly we're living through historic times. So I did notice, if you turn to the next slide, we won't take the time to do the full chat, but StoryCorps has some suggested questions, and you can click a couple of times, Maribel. But I did also provide the link there for you for the StoryCorps. So thinking about good questions as we're living through this historic time, it's a wonderful time to take note and have students or yourself to journal and prepare artifacts for this time. So on the next slide, I really like the questions that they have. And maybe you can prepare a family recording of some of these questions, or invite your students to do the same and share a scrapbook or written or oral language interviews around some of these questions and other questions, and of course develop some mini lessons for your students on how to ask good questions and what's the difference between an open-ended and a closed question, and some of those follow-up questions and things like that. So I believe there's just a few apps you can check out, StoryCorps being one of them, but some of these also enable you to do a timeline of your family. I think that's the Tree Lines one, and others that you can add in pictures and artifacts directly on these sites. And I chose these ones because they appeared to be free.
Okay, so that's some of the digital things, but I'm like grandma here. I love hands-on fun. I'm definitely a board game person, and I love this picture because this is where the kids are right now. She's looking at Encyclopedia Britannica, and the kid's like, oh, that's prehistoric Googling. So, social studies is full of lots of reading, so we do a lot of prehistoric stuff. And Maria, I'm going to skip right over this since you covered it. And like I said, I'm a board game person, and they also have these digitally. I like playing with older kids, 6th grade through 12. I like playing Risk. I'm not going to go through all the steps on how to play Risk, but I did simplify the steps for you, and they're in your handouts, the materials that you can use. And if you're just creating this at home, just get a big map. You don't have to go out and buy the board game. And you can create tokens of anything you want. So you can, use toy soldiers. You can use game board pieces. You can go buy 2 or 3 bags of dry Goya beans and play this. You can use Lego pieces, bingo chips, jacks of different colors. My brother and sister-in-law got Play-Doh out and they made little balls of different colored clay so that they can play, or shapes, or colored cardstock that's cut in pieces. So you can use anything you want to add as a game token. And all you need is some index cards. You do need 5 dice, 3 of one color, 2 of another. And like I said, I gave you in the handouts the simplified version of the on how to play Risk, but basically it's using dice to figure out who's going to attack and who's going to win. And the winner at the end is the person who has the most territories. For the little ones, teaching geography is really hard, and they really have a hard time remembering the continents. So you could always play Geography Twister. What is it that you need? A large map, which, by the way, if you can't buy one, you can always go outside and with colored chalk, do some coloring with colored chalk. You can use a lot of rugs and things that are coming out, or just even put pictures of the different continents on a rug. But and you need a spinner. You have a copy of a simplified spinner in your handouts, but there are a lot of them on the internet to take a look at. Each player spins twice. The first time they spin is for location, the second time for their body parts. And then they do it again, and you figure out where your hands go and where your foot goes. And then you find and label either a globe or a blank map of the places that you visited while you were twisting around the map. Now, our next one is Kate. Kate, I love time capsules. Can you help us out on how to create one in our families?
Sure thing. I thought building a time capsule is a nice thing to do, either to get your class to do virtually, or you could do it with your own family. Because we are living, it's nice to have learners realize that they are historically situated, and right now they are living in a period of time that will be historically significant. So this is an activity to encourage learners to view this period from the perspective of the future. Like looking back on what you're currently living, it may not seem very special to you, or maybe it does, depending on your perspective on this time period. But for somebody from the future looking at this, what would they want? What would you want them to know? And what represents this time period for you as a person? So creating a time capsule is a nice way to do this. So I'm just going to kind of go through this briefly. Some things to consider are time frames. So when would you ideally like this time frame to be discovered? So is it something that you want to open with your same family in 30 years, or 10 years or 20 years? Do you want it to be for future generations of your family or a future class at your school? So thinking about the time frame, how long term do you want this capsule to last? Or who the audience, who is it intended for, can help you decide what items to include in your time capsule. Okay, on the next slide, the first thing you can do is brainstorm some items to include. I've included a brainstorming sheet in your handouts. Obviously, we want to encourage people to include non-perishable items, and I put it on there because I started brainstorming with my own kids, and the first things that they wanted to put in were food. So I thought it would go without saying, but let's just say no non-perishable items. You want it to be something that's representative, both of you personally and of this special period of time, this quarantine time, for example. It should be something personal. It should be appropriately sized. So whatever container you're using, obviously it needs to be small enough to fit in there. And if you're taking a picture using newspaper clippings, put them inside a plastic sleeve or inside Ziploc bags. Here's an example of the brainstorm sheet that I put in there. I started brainstorming with my family and we got a little thrown off, so we just have a couple in here. My item was a fabric scrap from sewing a mask, and I might put it in a plastic bag with a label so that it would explain what it is, and it's significant because obviously making masks is important at this time, but that's never been important to me before. But I can't put a mask in because we actually still need them. My daughter wanted to put in a distance learning class schedule because that represents her experience in school right now. So as a family or as a class, you can brainstorm all sorts of ideas. And then if somebody's choosing to include that in the time capsule, they can put their name next to the item. Okay. So to incorporate some different domains, reading and or writing and speaking, for example, one idea is to write a letter to include in the time capsule. And I was thinking of Annie's StoryCorps questions. Those are really great starters, ideas to frame a letter. So if you have your learners writing a letter, you of course want to support them. You could write a letter together. You could also brainstorm words that you might want to include and give them a word bank. You could provide them with a model letter or provide them with a script. So paragraph scripting, which is sort of extended sentence frames to give them those important transition words that we were looking at that are important to history writing. This will give them a chance to write in that narrative style. So you do want to, of course, support your learners, but having them write a letter to include could be a great addition to the time capsule. To incorporate some speaking on the next slide, we could have our learners explain why they've included their items. So again, we want to support them with some sentence frames. Here are some ideas. Or if the sentence frames are too much, you can help them by providing labels or names for some items that they may not have the words for yet. Okay. So you also need to decide where you're going to bury your time capsule. So this could be outdoors, and you of course want to put a marker on the spot that you're going to remember where it is, or that will alert other people to where it is in the future. Or it could be inside. You could tuck it away in a storage place or a closet. And based on that, you want to use an appropriate container, something small, not too large. Metal or glass are obviously best or outside, something that seals. And a sturdy box could work well if you choose to do it inside. And afterwards, we want to reflect on the experience. So this is a nice way to incorporate different domains of language usage. So with a multimedia presentation. So this could be a Flipgrid video, or learners could come together and do a Google slide presentation. But creating a time capsule is a really nice way to help incorporate history in the making.
Okay, well, we included here on the slide some really good resources that you can use. Some of them we've talked about, some of them we haven't. I love Dr. Don's social studies website because really it is a really great website that looks at not just history, but also English language arts, and it looks at science, and it looks at all the different content areas. He does a really great job of developing really great connections for kids of all ages. Then we have the geography games and Nearpod and National Geographic, and those Google Lit trips are really cool. So, and Facing History in Ourselves, which is journaling, and a lot of history is written in journals. So it's a really great way to connect. But those are just some of the resources. There are a lot more out there. Now it's your turn. We're going to do a quick chat. We're only going to take about a minute. And we're going to ask you, which activities would you like to adapt and use from home that you could use to help teach social studies, history, geography, or any of the other areas? So take a minute out, just a minute, and write down some ideas, maybe some resources that you want to share with your colleagues.
Okay, Maribel, and you can add the next question as well there. So it's maybe you have one of the activities from today that you'd like to adapt and use, and then are there any activities that you've been engaging in with your students that you'd like to share with the group? And just for the sake of time, I know we're over, so I would suggest people can add in their ideas there, and then I'll continue just with a couple more slides to wrap it up based on some of our frequently asked questions. So today is our 8th webinar, and we do have a couple more sessions available on dual language. Those are very full at this time, so it's possible you might be turned away from the live session, but the next 2 are on dual language. And then on Friday, May 29th, we're going to continue the family and community wellness. Last time we thought about social emotional wellness. This time we'll be thinking about physical fitness and supporting our health and learning in summer 2020. We do have some great activities and want to make them as usable as possible for you to share with your students. Again, you can access these topics at the website, which will be sent out to you as well in an email that you'll receive tomorrow. So on the next slide, a few people have asked about our other online learning opportunities. We do have some self-paced asynchronous courses on a variety of topics. Our newest one being Building Background and Comprehensible Input, Cal SciAp Essentials. You'll find those on the Cal website and under our online courses. And then another opportunity, so those are all 5 hours and self-paced, but on the next slide, we are in general doing some moderated courses and sessions with school districts, but in particular our Cal SciAp training of trainers. We always have a full cohort every summer and fall and winter as well. This year we're moving it online, and we're excited to have a flipped classroom experience and make it as interactive as possible with both asynchronous and synchronous learning, so leveraging those best practices. And so we're starting off with our SciAp options, the foundations. Both of these are training of trainers, but one is the foundations training of trainers and one is on advanced coaching strategies. So if you would like more information, you can email solutions@cal.org.